What's up, folks? Welcome back to Life Chats with Friends, your sacred space for all things self-discovery and authentic living. I am so happy and excited to be back here with you for yet again another episode of these beautiful conversations. I am so excited to be here today to be joined by Diego Gonzalez-Zuniga. Really, what this episode is about, it is a celebration of pride for the LGBTQIA plus community. This month is all about learning, education, and we'll be talking about things like allyship. Specifically, we will be diving into dual themes of building authentic relationships and fostering allyship within our community in honor of this month. As I just shared, I'm excited to talk to Diego about the significance of authenticity in cultivating meaningful connections, both online and offline, and why this is important for members of our community now, especially through the lens of mental health. We'll also discuss how things like vulnerability, empathy, and genuine connection can create a more supportive community and combat loneliness among LGBTQIA plus individuals, which has become more of an issue now post-pandemic, which is where we're currently sitting. Diego, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Antonio. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. And I know that you recently just relocated to New York and your partner is right behind you, getting ready to do so. How's the move been?
It's good. We're about to get into the thick of it. He's moving over in about a month or so at the end of the month, which is coming up really soon. So we're just kind of preparing. He's been packing slowly, and yeah, I'm super excited to have him here in New York and to start our next adventure together.
Beautiful. And for everyone listening, before we dive in, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about Diego. Diego is a dynamic force in the fashion, marketing, and community sphere, renowned for his unique blend of retail and marketing expertise and leadership, as well as advocacy for neighborhood enrichment. He's played a significant role in the growth of major brands such as Madewell, J. Crew, Abercrombie & Fitch, Ralph Lauren, Club Monaco, and has collaborated with the global retail heavyweight that is Westfield. His extensive retail leadership experience includes managing flagship stores, driving sales growth, and fostering strategic partnerships. He's also provided his expertise in consulting for various local organizations and brands across DC and New York, focusing on social and digital initiatives. He currently resides in New York City, and Diego channels his passion for style into his blog that is the amazing Diego Downtown, which he launched to offer a unique perspective on men's fashion and lifestyle in 2016. Diego Downtown stands out as a premier destination for the modern, fashion-conscious man. Based in New York City, it is an online hub of the latest fashion trends, grooming tips, and personal development advice, making it an essential guide for those striving to elevate their lifestyle and wardrobe. Diego's compelling content and insights make his blog a must follow for anyone interested in staying ahead in fashion and life. And echo that. Beyond his personal achievements, Diego is a passionate advocate for sustainable fashion and well-being. He's currently focused on providing freelance consulting services, primarily catering to clients in the retail and hospitality sectors. His consulting encompasses a wide range of areas, including brand strategy, content creation, and social media strategy. With his deep understanding and experience in the digital landscape, Diego excels in crafting tailored strategies that resonate with target audiences, elevating brand presence, and driving engagement in today's fast-paced digital world. And if you don't know him, if you're not currently following him, please go do so. He'll also share his links at the end of this. But everything that I've just read, can 100% agree with. So much value in everything that you've shared, or everything that I've come across that you've shared in the year
Thank
and
you.
a half now or so since we've been connected. Diego, once again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I know it's like crazy hearing it back from you. I'm like, what a journey. I'm like, this is such a journey. So no, thank you so much again for having me. I'm super excited.
Beautiful. And to kick us off, my first question for you, and really to set the stage for this conversation, I'd love for you to share a personal experience or journey with us that highlights the importance of authenticity, really, in building relationships within the LGBTQIA plus community. And if you'd be able to tie that back for me, kind of thinking about how that relates to and or supports better mental health.
Yeah, of course. Honestly, I really took some time to think about the answers to this question, and I honestly can't pinpoint it to like one specific event. I honestly would probably have to say it was my journey, probably from,
Mm,
my early DC days, right when I moved to Washington DC, and like, was kind of newly out. I had just recently come out in college, and kind of going to DC, being able to meet new people. It's a brand new city, new experiences. That was really kind of like my first kind of, foray into like, really exploring who I was as a gay man, and like really what I
mm,
wanted to, who I wanted to be. Because I think, we go to college kind of thinking like, hey, it's, your first time away from your family. You can be whatever you want, but I think college still kind of has its limitations. It still has this like expectations that you have to put on yourself. So I think, when I moved to DC, it was really a way for me to, again, explore who I was, my identity, and who I really was. And so I think being able to kind of, moving to a city and kind of thinking to myself, hey, I want to try and be everything for everyone, right? So I'm gonna do
mm,
all the things. I'm gonna go out clubbing. I'm gonna go to that show. I'm gonna go to, meet those people. I'm gonna go into like social sports. I'm gonna, try and dig it into those social circles, right? To really meet more gay people, because I didn't really have a lot of gay friends. I didn't really have a lot of people to connect with. So I think for me it was really about connecting with others, because I had just come from a kind of a very, I don't know, I don't want to say like, super kind of like small school, because I definitely came from a big university, but it
mm,
was more about finding others that were maybe going through the same thing that I was going through, that were kind of on the same path, where they were newly out, and they had, were also kind of exploring their sexuality, who they were. So I think for me, it was really meeting a lot of people in the community. I think it was everything from meeting my neighbors that I
mm.
lived with in my building, going out, meeting people. I'm obviously a very social person, that. So I connect with a lot of people when I'm out. I love to just understand people's journeys. I think we learn so much from people when we understand where they actually came from, because as I'm
Mm,
sure you can attest to too, everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own story to tell, and how they were brought up, and how they were raised, and how they were kind of introduced into their lifestyle. And for me, it was really about connecting with others that I think were going through something similar that I was. That was really important. And so I think for me, over the 10-year span that I lived in DC, it was really about how do I create a platform? Because I think I got to a point where I was like, wow, I looked back even like 2 years or 3 years later after I moved to DC, and I was like, wow, look how far you've come in these three
mm,
years, right? And then I'm like, wow, think about where you're going to be in 5, think about where you're going to be in 8 years. And so I wanted to be able to say, hey, I want to create a platform where I want to be something for someone that I didn't have when I was coming out, or when I was on my path or my journey. And so that's really kind of why I really started my platform, when it was before the age of TikTok and Instagram and the social media revolution, as I call it. Just being able to have a platform, being able to have a space that I owned, that was really authentic to who I was, and I could control the narrative. I could control who I wanted to be and what I wanted to message out to the world. So that was really kind of how Diego Downtown kind of came to light. In terms of, I think, kind of how that really pivots into affecting mental health, obviously that seems like an amazing kind of journey that I was on, but I would be, remiss to say if that wasn't really hard. There were moments where it was really hard for me to make friends. It was really hard for me to relate to other people. It was hard for me to be able to feel accepted. And so I think for me, it was really about, how do I relate to others? How can I connect with others, I think in a way that isn't just superficial, right? So I think some of the times we think about, oh, hi, how are you? We're out and
Mm,
about, or we see people at a party or at a gathering or a get together, and it's very cordial, and I think that's great. But I needed more, right? I needed people to understand, am I crazy for thinking this way? Do I feel like this is something that am I on the right path? So I think that was really a big hurdle that I really had to overcome. I think was really about connecting with others in a much more authentic way. And honestly, I'll be really honest, it was hard. I think
mm,
I was still young. I still didn't really know, right? I still wanted to just be kind of globally accepted. I wanted to
mm,
just be someone that was well liked by others. And I just think I wanted a community. I wanted like an instant community. And so I think for me, it was important. But I also kind of like didn't realize that like accepting that big community was accepting a lot of energy and people from a lot of different, I think a lot of different trauma, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different journeys. And so I don't think I was prepared
mm,
to really face the brunt of all of that. And it took a toll on me. I was really the people person. I was the people guy. I was the
mm.
social butterfly. I was constantly out and about. I was constantly in the public eye. I definitely was a sociable person, but I think it had its toll on me because I couldn't be everything for everyone. I was on my journey personally, and then I was also trying to maybe help others out of dark places, or I wanted to help them feel accepted. And I feel like I still hadn't figured out who I was yet, but I wanted to still be like that helping hand. I wanted to be that person that's like boosting them up, right? I wanted to be that
Mm.
person that's celebrating them and saying like, I love who you are. I love who you're becoming. I love that you've been so authentic and open. But it was challenging. I think even for me at that young age, it was still really challenging because I was still figuring out who I was.
Beautiful. And thank you for the vulnerability. And I do have a follow-up question to that, kind of
Sure.
thinking about where you are now and knowing what you know from the journey and experience that you've had. How would you define what an authentic connection is? And kind of also thinking through like the typical experience of a gay man, and not speaking to the experience of gay men everywhere, but like the experience of gay men in cities, for example, kind of where we're located and how connections are built and made. Like what is an authentic connection?
Yeah, I think great question. I think really what makes an authentic connection is getting past the surface level questions, really understanding who they are, how did they get there, hearing about people's past. I think sometimes we're afraid to kind of get below the surface and ask those questions, but I think the fact that you're showing time and investment and getting to know that person, and you're actually taking the time out of like maybe a really busy place or a busy setting or a social setting, you're taking the time to actually get to know that person, I think shows that person that you're actually willing to take the time to sit down with them and
Mm,
understand who they really are and what makes them them.
mm,
And so I think really asking really kind of insightful and also just intentional questions. What are you passionate about? What was your kind of like gay awakening, or what was your
mm.
coming out story? I think even a lot of people that I've connected with have really connected with what is your coming out story, because
Yeah,
that is something I think that we can all relate to universally, right?
exactly.
It's something that like everybody has a story, everybody has a journey that they were on. And so I think that's a great way to get to know people. And so really being able to get past the initial, hi, how are you, how's your day going, how's your week been, and really asking. I think the first step is really asking. I think the second
Mm.
step is taking the time, and then I think the third step is really just listening, and really being there to listen to them. And I think that you're already doing more than I think they probably ever anticipated or expected. So I think that's a big piece.
100% agreed. And I'm also curious to like, or to me at least, that is the gateway for like collective
Mhm.
transformation and impact. If we can all connect with each other on that level, just imagine what we're able to do kind of going beyond the surface.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think power in numbers always. I think for me it's really about, I think this is how I really think about it. Now,
Mm,
you have to be really comfortable with who you are. yourself, and you have to really be aligned with what is your personal brand, right? Like, who are you? Where did you come from? Do you feel really confident in who you are? I'll be very honest. I went through a super challenging year this past year. I went through a super, I mean, you're going to smile because I know that you've heard a lot of this, but I've been through a super transformational year and a half. I'd probably say 2 at this point. Even myself, knowing now what I know that I didn't even know about myself a year ago is just incredible to even think about how far I've come and how much I've grown over the past year. Having that self-connection with yourself is super important. And then I think you have to rub that off on others. I think that you have to kind of be that light, or also be that source for others, right? I think there's kind of these famous quotes that's like, be around others that bring out the best in you, be around others that bring out the brighter light in you. And so I think that that's important, right? You need to be around people that are always trying to make you be the best version of yourself. And so I think that that's why I've been super intentional about picking the people that I want to be around, picking the people that I want to spend the most time with, and the most authentic people. I think, like, again, we've all heard it, but like, you cannot buy authenticity. You cannot build it in a lab. You cannot shoot it. You cannot like create it. It is inherent, and it is something that everyone harnesses. But I think that a lot of people are almost afraid to see what their true authenticity looks like and who they really are. But who they really are cannot be replicated, duplicated, or imitated. That is what makes people uniquely themselves. And so I think that like that is something that we all as human beings have to understand and know, in a world where we're constantly being marketed to be something else other than ourselves. And we need to kind of always never lose sight of that. We always need to focus on ourselves because we're the most important part.
I love that. And for folks that are listening that may not be a part of this community, I did mention up front that we will talk about allyship, and I will get there. But before I do that, Diego, I'm also curious to hear from you, or kind of in your opinion, what role does vulnerability and empathy play in creating a sense of belonging and connection in queer spaces, as we think about, again, like our experiences and how the spaces operate? Or it's like noticing, for example, like levels of oppression within the community. Like, how do we go beyond that to really connect and see one another to create, true belonging, true connection, again, to get to a place where we can have deeper and more meaningful community impact?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I think the first kind of part of it is the vulnerability part. I think that that is something that we hold very guarded and that we hold very close chested. And so I think that is almost a layer of, I call it intimacy. It's really something where you are sharing kind of an intimate part of yourself. And so I think that being vulnerable, just as it is important, like for example, in our relationships that we have with our partners, it's just as important having vulnerability with our family members and with our friends. And so I think that being able to speak about vulnerability is a strength. I think being open to speaking about vulnerability is a strength, and then just being vulnerable is a strength. Those are just kind of like the 3 facets I think about when I'm connecting with people, right? Like, I think if you kind of know, or I see that someone isn't being vulnerable with me, I know that they're not maybe giving me their most authentic self. And so I know that I'm getting a really edited version of that person, but I really want to know deep down, who is this person, right? Like, what are they about? What do they really care about? What are their values? What do they do when we're not out at these like big events or parties or, these social events, whatever they may be? I want to know who you are when you're on the couch and you're sick and like you are having a really shitty day, right? Like, I really want to know, because that is, I think, when we really understand like who they really are.
True reflection.
And then I think, just connecting with others, I think that's an important part too. You have to be open to letting people connect with you as an individual. I think like even for example, I'm going to use you as an example. How you and I connected was through a mutual friend, and I call it kind of like the lily pad effect, where you have someone that you're connected to that understands who you are. I've been vulnerable with them. They know how far I've come or where I've been. And so they were like, hey, I want you to meet this amazing
This person.
human being named Antonio. And so that's how our relationship started. And that's how things kicked off. And I think that people have to be open to connecting others, because I think, like how it is, it's, people say it's 6 degrees of separation. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's actually like 2 degrees of separation. I think that like we're all going through similar things. Yes, we may
We're
have
just not
different,
talking about it.
we're just not talking about it. We come from different, socioeconomic backgrounds. We come from different cultural backgrounds. And I think that we need more people to kind of be that connector, right? Like that people that's saying like, hey, you're going through this, and, or, you two have come such a long way, and I feel like you two need to meet, and there, like I said, it goes back to what I said, there's strength in numbers, right? Like
100%.
when you're around people that, are going through something similar or have been on a similar journey, you relate to them so much closer and on a much deeper level.
I think too, the only other thing I would add to that is really being intentional about the connections that you're looking to make. So recognizing that it requires effort and some involvement on your end. Like, it's not just going to magically happen. And I think oftentimes when you have those surface level connections, it doesn't really go anywhere else because there is no kind of intention behind the wanting to meet and get to know that person. Yeah, that's the only thing I would add.
I totally agree.
And building on that, I'm also curious to hear from you and kind of any insights or advice that you may have for anyone that belongs to our community that may be thinking about now, like, okay, I've tried this, I'm struggling with this. How do I navigate and overcome challenges related to building authentic connections, or really getting to, again, like, go deeper beyond the surface with people that could be good for my or their overall growth, health, and well-being?
Yeah, I think we are creatures of habit, and I think that sometimes we find ourselves, we are already in situations that are already created for us to socialize. So for example, a music festival or a concert or a social gathering. But I think taking yourself out of that situation and creating more of a intimate, scenario where you can have one-on-one time with that person, or you can connect with that person on a much deeper level. That's, because, I'll be honest, I think sometimes that, you're around a lot of people, it's not the right time, maybe you can't start having a super, in-depth conversation or a deep conversation about, your personal journeys or struggles. And so I think it's about making space for that person and making time, right? Like if it's truly a priority for you, and it's important to you to connect with that person and make space for that person, then make it a priority, right? Like make sure that, because I think they're going to feel like, wow, I'm important to Diego. And then, you're going to feel like, well, it's important to me to connect with, Antonio or whoever it is. Right. And so that, I think, shows a lot of effort and a lot of energy in terms of like just making space for them. And so I think being in those kinds of settings where even if it's a phone call or it's a FaceTime or you're meeting for coffee, right? It's like those moments where we remove all of the noise and we connect with others on a much deeper level, that we can actually have these like super intimate and like vulnerable conversations.
Lovely. And I think as we are thinking about connections and building our networks, it goes way beyond our community, and the success of our community also sits outside of our community. And so that includes allies and people that are really strong advocates for people like us, people that belong to queer spaces, backgrounds, identities. And so I'm curious to hear from you how you would define allyship, and then what does that mean to you personally? And then from there, we'll get into what can an ally do to educate themselves, or allies that may be around these communities. How do you really lean in and support the community to, again, help drive this collective advancement?
Yeah. So for me, again, allyship is really important. I think that, we have our brothers and sisters, but I think that, allyship is just as important, whether it's coming from your family or your friends or your neighbor. And so I think, there's a couple ways that I think I really think about allyship. And so, for me, it's, not really about what the media is telling us to do. It's not about what, we're being told to do. It's what do you feel personally inside of you to be able to be an ally for your friends or your coworker or your neighbor or family member. And so I think for me, allyship can show up in many different ways. I think, the biggest thing is, I think, holding space for others. I think there's no other greater sign of your allyship than actually giving people a seat at the table, giving people room to talk, and making people feel seen. I think that that is the most kind of initial way that you can show allyship. I think the other ways, for me, that I've seen a lot of my allies and a lot of my friends, show up for me is, especially in like workplaces and, even in social settings, where people use derogatory terms, or they're saying something that's really negative or hurtful about our community, right? How do they really stand up in those moments? How do they come from a very informed place, but also a place of care, right? A place of like really saying like they're important, they're human, right? They're just like us, and there needs to be kind of that voice, right? Because I think my mentality is we shouldn't have to fight for a seat at the table. We already have a seat at the table. We are a huge, huge, huge world, and we all are humans that come from all different areas of the world. And so I think that there isn't one perfect human being. There isn't one perfect human being that we're supposed to be modeled after or be like. I think that we are all unique humans when we're birthed from day one, right? Like we're all unique human beings. And so I think that we have to really always know that we have allies in our corner, in the sense of they're going to speak up, they're going to be there, they're going to be present. But I also challenge a lot of my allies in saying, how are you educating yourself on what's going on? How are you informing yourself on either topics or issues or things that are happening in the world or in the culture, like human rights, same-sex marriage? It's about connecting with others and being informed. And so I think that that's really how you show up as allyship. I think that we can donate, and these are more of the not silent, but like these are things that we can do that are very passive. But I think there's a lot of active ways that allies can participate and that they can be involved, right? Whether it's, again, speaking up, or whether it's starting a nightly talk, or hosting something, or bringing something up at work. There's so many different ways you can show up as an ally. And like I said, I think sometimes people think that they need to be like standing at a podium, like speaking to a million people, and that's allyship. Like that's not ally. Yes, that is one example of allyship, but like allyship
comes
could
in
just
many
be
different
you.
forms.
Yeah, it could be you talking to like just one other person, right? It could be you talking to a group of people. So I think it's just important about being an ally. Period. Full stop. I think you need to just be an ally and be present. I think that is already winning so much.
I think too, allyship is also a journey, or it's recognizing that it can be a journey, or it is a journey for many people. And I always come back to my own experience and kind of thinking of my family in where they started from this place of like, nope, we don't talk about it. Like, this is just no, to kind of now it's like asking the right questions, or like kind of being like, hey, I spoke to someone at the doctor's office that was gay or queer, and now I understand their experience. But like getting to that place of like, we can talk about it. Like, what is your advice or kind of perspective on kind of the responsibility that we hold as people that belong to this community in helping to move people along the journey, either through storytelling or through having the courage to surface the questions, or going to those places that might be a little bit more challenging, recognizing that this is how we drive the change. Like, we're not just going to shift perceptions overnight.
Totally.
For everyone.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think there's, again, a lot of ways that we can do it. And I think, I know it's funny, I was having this conversation today with a friend of mine. Like, it's like we live in this world now where we have so many different platforms to speak up and voice how we feel and reach communities and reach wider audiences. And so I'm thinking to myself, can you use that platform, right? Like, kind of like what I've done, right? I've done used my platform as a way to highlight creators and movers and shakers in the community. But I think a lot of that starts with, again, having the conversations. I think sometimes we're just afraid of having the uncomfortable conversation. I think we as humans are inherently thinking like it's a tidal wave of like, oh my gosh, it's so much responsibility. Like, what if they don't like me? Your self-saboteur comes into play. You kind of think to yourself like, oh gosh, what if I'm not good at kind of like saying what I want to say in a really eloquent way? Or I think it's just a matter of like, you don't have to, sometimes it doesn't have to be super formal. Sometimes it could just be casual conversation, and you're just coming from a place of authenticity. You're coming from a place of like true heart and feeling. And so I think that that's going to be a really powerful way to connect with people that, again, I think a lot of people overthink. I think they're constantly thinking, what are they going to think of me? Or what are they going to think of? You're entitled to have an opinion. You're entitled to feel how you want to feel, and no one's ever going to take that away from you, right? So I think knowing that and understanding that is really important, because I think once you pass kind of that barrier to entry, like that really, like that initial like hurdle, I think it's going to flow out of you. You're going to want to talk to more people. You're going to be like, wow, this is a lot easier than I thought it was. I was overthinking this. And so I think that you have to kind of pass over that initial hurdle.
Yeah. And I think too, if you do get to the point where you are having those conversations and people are showing you who they are, also believing that and just recognizing that, hey, maybe these people are just not meant to come along for the ride, and that is totally okay. Like specifically with family, and I know that this is common for a lot of gay, queer people, but if you are having those conversations with your family or trying to get to that place where you're looking for more family advocates or allies and that's just not coming through, just recognizing when the right time is to just let that go and leaning into chosen family, other friends that really see you for who you are 100%, in your authentic power, self, and nature, everything in between.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's no better way. I think people see it. I think it's also just like an inherent kind of like skill where it's like when someone's being really honest, it's like it's an unspoken thing. It's like when we cry, right? Like that is a feeling that is so organic and natural that like we know when someone is they're not holding back, like they're crying, there's tears, there's there's rawness there that it's not filtered, it's not coming through a filter, right? So you immediately feel connected to that person. You want to hug them, you want to console them, you want to be there for them when they're emotional.
Beautiful. And yeah, anybody listening to this, whether you belong to the community or you're an ally, this is where change begins. It's these types of conversations, it's tuning into these types of insights, it's checking in with yourself, it's checking your privilege, seeing where you are on the spectrum and understanding and being and belonging and living and figuring out how you can make small, subtle shifts, changes to that can really have a outsized impact on how we all progress as a society. And on that, Diego, I know you had mentioned this or briefly touched on this earlier in the conversation, but if you had to summarize like top 3 points on like tangible things that allies can do to really demonstrate their support to our community, both on an individual and systemic level, what would those things be?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think on a systemic level, let's get there first. I think it's really about how are you really showing up within your community from a political perspective, right? So how are you engaging with your local senators? How are you really engaging with your local political groups or even just organizations, like even local LGBT organizations? How are you present, right? Like, are you actually filled in on, either meetings they're having or events or fundraisers or just things that are, really moving the needle, that are making an impact? I think it's also about, empowering others that are maybe running for a certain office, or again, change starts within power and numbers, right? Change starts within our community. So if we're not supporting the people that actually want to make that change, it's going to be really hard for them to make that change, right? Yeah. So how are we showing up for those people that are actually trying to make changes, systemic changes, or things within our society that are impacting us as a community? And so I think it's really about, I think sometimes, we think about currently how we're doing, right, as a person in
Mm,
society, but then it's also thinking about, but what is this person going to do to affect change in society in like 5 years? What is this person going to do to a change in 10 years, 15 years, for people that maybe don't even know that they're in the community right yet, people that haven't
mm,
come out, right? Like, how are they going to change the way the world is shaped now, and how these people are accepted? And and I say accepted by like they don't have to be accepted, but how do these people not feel like they have to come out, like that coming
mm.
out is this like, I have to come out, like it
This
shouldn't have
big
to feel
thing,
that way.
yeah.
Right, like you're just a human, you're just a human being, and you are who you are. You don't have to go through this like legality, or
I
this
always
like,
think about that, and returning home always brings me back to this, but I'm like, my cousins aren't like, hey, I'm straight and I have a girlfriend. Like, it just is. So it's like,
yeah.
why?
Yeah, so I think like, how do we get there, right? And so I think that that's where we have to kind of show awareness. I think we have to show investment.
Mm,
We have to really show that we do care about the future, because again, like, we wouldn't be where you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for people from the past.
exactly.
So how do we continue to kind of carry on that legacy, and how do we continue to create that path for others and people that are looking up to us, people that are listening to this podcast right now, right? Like, they're thinking, okay, we're sparking change in them right now, and they're going to spark change for other people that are going to precede them, right? So
Mm,
that's really important. And then I think on an individual, perspective, I think it's again, it really ties back to like education, and really kind of like how you're informing yourself. By no means am I saying that you need to go and read every single book on LGBTQIA plus history and like understand the fabric of who we are and where we came from, but being able to be informed and understand the nuances of the things that we feel in the community every day, even the things that maybe
mhm,
you and I feel walking around the cities that we live in. Feeling the stares, the whispers, the things that
mhm.
people say under their breath, that is still something that we, I think,
It's
deal.
real.
It's
It
real.
is so real.
It's real. And so that awareness is really important. So I think for me, it's like two things when I'm meeting people. Number one, it's, do they have self-awareness? Are they very self-aware of themselves and who they are and how they fit into this amazing journey we call life? And then the awareness piece of others, right? Are they aware of other people and where they came from? Maybe they came from a really hard upbringing, or a very homophobic community, or an
Mm,
upbringing that we don't really know about, right? So is the self-awareness there? And so I think that education piece is really important, right? Practicing self-awareness. And no one is maybe born knowing to be self-aware, but it's
mm.
practice, right? It's really methodical, and it's something that you should be nurturing and honing as a human being as you kind of go through all of these like chapters of life.
And looking ahead, what do you envision as key opportunities for growth and progress in terms of advancements within our community, within the LGBTQIA plus community and spaces?
Yeah, I think it's timely with it kind of being Pride, but I think a lot of it needs to start with Pride is 1 month. Pride is
Hmm.
only 1 month of the year, and we don't just shut off who we are on July 1st. We don't shut off who we are on May 31st. Like, we are like this all the time, every day, 365 days a year. So really being able to always know that we, again, I'm going to say this, but like, we have a seat at the table, and that there are
Hmm.
people out there that hold light and candle for us, and are always advocating for us, and are always, whether it be an employee resource group at a company, or a social setting, or a fundraiser, or even just a coffee conversation you have with a friend,
Mm.
right? Like, holding space is so important, and it needs to just be something that we do all year, and not just during Pride Month. Don't get me wrong, I love that we have a Pride Month. I love that we can get together and celebrate who we are and our community, but we don't change. This is who we are. And so I think that we have to celebrate ourselves, and we have to continue to again, create space for others that feel scared to step into the light, that feel scared to be who they really are. Because as you and I both know, once you really embrace and celebrate and hug who you are as a person,
Magical.
there's no better feeling in the world. It's just
magical.
like I don't know what, like, no better feeling. It's just, it's euphoric. It's almost like you think to yourself, I didn't know that I could ever feel something like this. And you never want to look back. You're always just like, there's no turning back, because you're only going to be like, that I felt this, I want others to feel the same way that I felt. And there's no monetary value on that. There is no intrinsic, that is something that is just felt. And so I think, we still have a long way to go. I think that we have to keep the conversations going. I think it's, again, amazing that you do these conversations, and we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep creating space. I think that is the biggest thing for me. Until the day I die, I want to create space for everyone and anyone to be authentically who they are, whether it be a dance floor, whether it be a chair, whether it be a community event. I want to be able to have people feel who they want to be without any apologies.
Lovely. And thank you, Diego.
Of course.
And to everyone else on the other side of this line, listening or wherever you decided to tune in from today, we do truly hope that you all create the space to have the conversations you need to have, ask the questions, don't be afraid to get messy with it. Like these topics are not easy to navigate, but 100% promise you that the more that we get comfortable in being uncomfortable, like this again is really where change happens. And we are in such an incredible period of our existence where we just have access to so much information and also the opportunity to just experience at scale. So now is the time to dive in, and I hope you all use Pride Month as the opportunity to do so. Diego, some rapid fire questions for you before we tell everyone where they could learn more about you.
I'm ready.
Describe Pride for us in one word.
Overwhelming.
Yes, I love that. What's one thing you wish you knew when you were first coming out?
Question. I'd probably say, don't be afraid to be who you are. There's only one you.
I'm gonna have to write that down on a sticky note somewhere in here. One book everyone should read to better understand LGBTQIA plus issues.
It's probably super overhyped, but I feel like it's like, if I was teaching like an LGBT elementary school, it would be like required reading for everybody. But The Velvet Rage, you need to read it. It's I think for me it was a really important self-discovery book in terms of like how people are perceived and how they perceive themselves in our community, and I think it's super insightful, and it's honestly a good read, so I highly recommend.
I haven't read that, and will definitely add that to my list. Best advice you've ever received on being your authentic self, or best advice you would give?
Probably best, honestly, it's probably both, honestly. I would give it, and I've been given it, but you are loved. I think that love is the most powerful energy that exists on this planet. And I hear that constantly from my family, my friends, my partner. And that is so powerful to know that people hold space for you in this world. And so to know that it doesn't matter, you don't need to have a 6-figure job. You don't need to be the most successful person on earth. You don't need to be this flashy person, but just to know that you are surrounded by love is probably the most authentic and compassionate thing that you can say to, I think, anyone, even outside of our community. So I think just me saying that to maybe the people that are listening, like, you are loved, you are important, and there's no stronger power on this earth.
Beautiful. And last question, your biggest aha moment this year?
My biggest aha moment, I would probably say, is like, you are worth everything and then some, and then triple it, and then triple it again. Like, as I've said before, making space and holding space is important, and making the time for people, but it has to be a two-way street. Time is gold, and that is a currency that we will not get back. And that is so important. And I think people need to be able to give the time, but I think people also need to be willing to invest in the time. And so I think that is really important. You have to know that time is valuable, and you only have one life to live on this earth, and there's only ever going to be one version of you, and like one version, you on this earth. And so you have to take advantage. Like, you are only here for a limited time, and you're going to make an impact, whether it's big or small. So take your time and use it wisely.
Amen. And where can people find you to learn more? Your website, social media, etc., email, whatever you're willing to share.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on www.diegodowntown.com, all one word. And then my social handles are Diego Downtown, all together, all one word. They're all the same across all the different social media platforms to make it easy for everybody. Yeah, like I said, I please follow me. Antonio, like I said, he follows me. I have been on a journey this past year, and I just want to hold space and create that space for others. And honestly, Antonio, thank you so much for having me and creating this space for me to be able to share my story and my journey and what I've been on and what I've learned. So I would love to hear from people. I think for me, my DMs are always open. I want to be able to continue the conversation. I also kind of hold these similar conversations on my social channels as well. The name of my show is called Your Insecurity is Showing. So I want to continue doing the same that Antonio is doing. So again, I encourage anyone listening to please reach out. Honestly, that's why Antonio and I are here. Like we wouldn't be having this conversation and doing this if it was just between me and Antonio, So I think, hold a space for yourself and know that, no question is a stupid question, and we want to be there for you as a resource, even if we can share resources or things that we're reading, like there are books that I said that Antonio hasn't read yet. Like there's so much kind of sharing that we can do, and so there's no community if we don't share and we don't talk to one another. And so I think that is going to really be the best way for us to feel more connected outside of these fabricated social spaces and settings that we have been taught to be in. And so community starts with you listening. It starts with me and you, Antonio. And so I think that we have to continue to build the community, because I still think that there's even more community out there that hasn't even skimmed the surface yet of like the larger family that exists out there. Even you and I, like there's still so many people we have yet to meet and encounter. Totally. So just know that you are loved, there is community, and there is space for you in this world. So those are my parting words.
Beautiful. And
amazing.
I will add the link to your show in the show notes for anyone that didn't catch that, or if you're looking to copy and paste, all of his information will be in the show notes. Thank you all so much for taking the time to tune in. Happy Pride. Lean into all the resources this month. Enjoy yourself and be safe. We'll see you next month. Thank you so much.